Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Chapter 1. June. When for score and score of miles you wade new deep among tiger lilies, that is the one charm waiting. Water, there is not a drop of water there. Where Niagara water, but a cataract of sand, will you travel your 1,000 miles to see it? Why did the poor poet of Tennessee, upon suddenly receiving 2 handfuls of silver, deliberate whether to buy him a coat, which he sadly needed, or invest his money in a pedestrian trip to Rockaway Beach? Why is almost every robust, healthy boy with a robust, healthy soul in him at some time or other crazy to go to the sea? Why, upon your first voyage as a passenger, did you yourself feel such a mystical vibration when first told that you and your ship were not out of sight of land? Why did all Persians hold the sea holy? Why the Greeks? Why the Greeks um give it a separate deity and own brother of Jove? Sure, all this is not without meaning, and still deeper the meaning of that story of Narcissus, who, because he could not grasp the tormenting my image, he saw in the fountain, plunged into it, and was drowned. But that same image we ourselves see in all rivers and oceans is the image of the ungrapable phantom of life, and this is the key to it all. Now, when I say that I am the avid of going to sea, whenever I begin to grow hazy about the eyes and begin to be overcautious of my lungs, I do not mean to have it inferred that I ever go to the sea. As a passenger, for to go, uh, but a rag unless you have something in it. Besides, passengers get seasick, grow quarrelsome, don't sleep up nights, do not enjoy themselves much as general things. No, I never go as passenger, nor thou. I am something of a soul. Do I ever go to sea as a commodore or a captain or a cook? I haven't done the glory and distinction of such offices to those who like them. For my part, I abominate every kind water surfer whatsoever. It is quite as much as I can do to take care of myself, without taking care of ships, barks, brigs, schooners, and what not. And as for going as cooks out, I confess there is a considerable glory in that. A cook being a sort of officer on shipboard, yet somehow I never fastened broiling fowls. Thou once broil judicially butter and judgmentally salt and pepper. There is no one who will speak more respectfully, not to say reverentially, of a broiled fowl than I. I stuff a shirt or two into my old carpet bag, tuck in under my arm, and start for Cape Horn and the Pacific. Quite in the good city of old Manhattan, I duly arrived in New Bedford. It was on Saturday night in December. Much was a disappointment upon learning that the little pocket for Nantucket had already sailed and that no way of reach. That place will offer till the following Monday. As most young candidates for the pains and penalties of whaling stop, and the same New Bedford tends to embark on their voyage, and it may as well be related that I, for one, had no idea of so doing, for my mind was made up to sail in no other than a Nantucket craft, because there was a fine boisterous something about everything connected with the famous old island which amazingly pleased me. Besides, thought New Bedford has to late been gradually monopolizing the business of walling, and thought in this matter poor old Nantucket is now much behind her. Yet Nantucket was her great original, the tire of this cartouche, the place where none of the finest. I began to twitch all over. Besides, it was getting late, and my decent harpooner out to become and going bedwards. Suppose now he should tumble in upon me at midnight. How could I tell from what bell hole he had been coming? Landlord, I've been changed my mind about the harpooner. I shan't sleep with him. I'll try to bench here, just as you please. I'm sorry, I can spare you an a tablecloth for a mattress, and it's a plagiary road board here. Feeling of the notes and notches, but wait a bit. Screaming feeling of the knots and notches, but wait a bit. Screamed Shander. I've got a carpenter's plane there in the bar. Wait, Shander. I've got, I say, and I'll make you snug enough. So saying, he procured the plane and with his old silk handkerchief, first dusting the bench, vigorously set to planning away at my bed the while grinning like an ape. The shavings flew right and left, till at last the plain iron came up against an indestructible knot. The landlord was near spraining his wrist, and I told him for heaven's sake to quiet the bed was soft enough to suit me, and I did not know how all the planning in the world could make either down of a pine plank. So gathering up the shavings with another grin, and throwing them into the great stove in the middle of the room, he went about his business and left me in a brown study. I now took the measure of the bench and found that it was a foot too short, but that could be mended with a chair. But it was a foot too narrow, and the other bench room in there in the room was about 4 inches higher than the plan. One so there was not joking them. I then placed the first bench lengthwise along the only clear space against the wall, leaving a little interval between for my back to settle down in. But I soon found that there came such a draught of cold air over from under the sill of the window, that this plan will never do at all, especially as another current from the rickety door met the one from the window, and both together form a series of small windlass in the immediate vicinity of the spot where I had thought to spend the night. The devil fetch the harpooner, thought I, but stop. Couldn't I steal a march on him? But his door inside and jump into his bed, not to be wakened by the most violent knockings. It seemed no bad idea, but upon a second thought I dismissed it. For who could tell but what the next morning, so soon as I popped out of the room, the harpooner might be standing in the entry, all ready to knock me down.
Landlord, said I, going up to him as cool as Smithy Eckline, a snowstorm. Landlord, stop whistling. You and I must understand one another, and that too without delay. I come to your house and want a bet. You tell me you can only give me a half of one, that the other half belongs to a certain harpooner, and about this harpooner, one I have not yet seen. You persist in telling me the most mystifying and expertine story, tending to begetting me an uncomfortable feeling towards the man who you can design for my bedfellow, a sort of connection, landlord, which is an intimate and confidential one in the highest degree. I now demand of you to speak out, and tell me who and what this harpooner is, and whether I shall be in all respects safe to spend the night with him. And um, in the first place, you will be so good as to unsay that story about selling his head, which, if true, I take to be good evidence. that this harpooner is stark mad, and I've no idea of sleeping with a madman. And you, sir, you, I mean landlord, you, sir, by trying to induce me to do some numbling, would thereby render yourself liable to a criminal prosecution? Well, said the landlord, fetching a long breath, that's a pretty long sermon for a chap that reads a little now and then. But be easy, be easy. This here harpooner I have been telling you of has just arrived from the South Seas, where he brought up a lot of long New Zealand's head. Great curious, you know, and he sold all of them, but one. And that's one he's trying to sell tonight, 'cause tomorrow's Sunday, and it will not do to be selling humans' head about the streets when folks in going to churches. He went to the streets when he went to last Sunday, but I stopped him just as he was going out of the door with 4 heads strung on a string for all the earth like a string of onions. This account cleared up the otherwise unaccountable mystery and showed that the landlord, after all, had had no idea of following me. But at the same time, what could I think of a harpooner who stayed out of a Saturday night, clinging to the Holy Sabbath, engaged in such a cannibal business as selling the heads of dead idolaters? Depend upon it, landlord, the harpooner is a dangerous man. He pays regular, was the rejoinder. But come, it's getting dreadful late. You had better be turning folks. It's a nice bed. Saul and me sleep in that bed the night we were split. There's plenty room for 2 to kick about in that bed. It's an almighty big bed that, why afore we give it up? Saul used to put our Sam and little John in the foot of it, but I got a dreaming and sprawling about it one night, and somehow Sam go pitched on the floor and came near breaking his arm. After that, Saul said it wouldn't do. Come along here, I'll give you a glimpse in a jiffy. And so saying, he lighted a candle and held it towards me, offering to lead the way. But I stood irresolute when looking at a clock in the corner. He exclaimed, it's Sunday. You won't see the harpooner tonight. He's come to anchor somewhere. Come along then. Do come. When you come, I considered the matter a moment, and then upstairs we went, and I was ushered into a small room, cold as clam and furnished. Sure enough, with a prodigious bed, almost big enough, indeed, for any 4 harpooners to sleep abreast. There, said the landlord, placing the candle on a crazy old sea chest that did double duty as a washstand and central table. There, make yourself comfortable now, and good night to ya. I turned round from eyeing the bed, but he had disappeared. Folding back the counterpane, I stopped over the bed, thought none of them elegant. It yet stood the scrutiny tolerably well. I then glanced round the room, and besides the bedstead and central table, could see no other furniture belonging to the place but a rude shelf, the 4 walls, and a paper fireboard representing a man striking a whale. Of things not properly belonging to the room, there was a hammock lashed up and thrown upon the floor in one corner, also a large cement bag containing the harpooner wardrobe, no doubt in lieu of a land trunk. Likewise, there was a parcel of outlandish bone fish hooks on the shelf over the fireplace, and a tall harpoon standing at the head of the bed. But what is this on the chest? I took it up and held it close to the lamplight, and felt it, and smelled it, and tried every way possible to arrive at some satisfactory conclusion concerning it. I can compare it nothing but a large door mat ornamented and the edges with little tinkling tacks, something like the stained perca pin, quills round an Indian moccasin. There was a hole or a slit in the middle of this mat, as you see the same in South American ponchos. But could it be possible that any sober harpooner will get at least show his chest and arms, as I leave these cover parts of him were checkered with the same squares as his face. His back, too, was all over the same dark squares. He seemed to have been in a 30 years' war and just escaped from it with a sticking plaster shirt. Still more, his very legs were marked as if a parcel of dark green frogs were running up the trunks of younger palms. It was now quite plain that he must be some abominable savage or other shipped aboard of a wild man in the South Seas, and so landed in his Christian country. I quacked to think of it. A peddler of heads, too, perhaps, the heads of his own brothers. He might take a fancy to mine. Heavens, look at that tomahawk! But there was no time for shuddering, for now the savage went about something that completely passionate my attention, and convinced me that he must indeed be ahead and going to his heavy grego or rappel or dreadnought, which he had previously hung on a chair. He flung in the pocket and produced a length, a curious little deformed image with a hunch on its back, and exactly the color of the 3 days. Old Congo baby, remembering the embalmed head. At first, I almost thought that this black mannequin was a real baby, preserving some similar inner. But seeing that it was not at all limber, and that it glistened a good deal like polished ebony, I conclude that it must be nothing but wooden idol, which indeed it proved to me. For now, the savage goes up to the empty fireplace, and removing the paper fireboards, sets up this little hunchback image, like a tempting feed between the andirons, the chimney jams, and all the bricks inside were very sooty, so that I thought this fireplace made a very appropriate little shrine or chapel from his Congo idol. I now screw my eye hard towards the half hidden image, feeling but ill at ease meantime to see what was next to follow. First, he takes about a double handful of shavings out of his grego pocket and places them carefully before the idol, then laying a bed of ship biscuits on top and applying the flame from the lamp. He kindly the shaving into a sacrificial blaze. Presently, after many hasty snatches into the fire, and still hastier withdrawals of his fingers, whereby he seemed to be scoring them badly, he at last succeeded in drawing out the biscuit, then blowing off the head and ashes a little, he made a polite offer of it to the little negro, but the little David did not seem to fancy such rye into a doormat and parade the streets of any Christian town in that sort of guise. I put it on to try it, and it weighed me down like a harper, being uncommonly shaggy and thick, and I thought a little damp as thought this mysterious harpooner had been wearing it of a rainy day. I went up in it to a bit of glass stuck against the wall, and I never saw such a sight in my life. I tore myself out of it in such a hurry that I gave myself a kick in the neck. I sat down on the side of the bed and commenced thinking about this head-paddling harpooner and his doormat. After thinking some time on the bedside, I got up and took off my money jacket, and then stood in the middle of the room, thinking. I then took off my coat and thought a little more in my shirt sleeves, but beginning to feel very cold now, half undressed as I was, and remembering what the landlord said about the harpooner's not coming home at all that night, it being so very late, I made no more ado but jump out of my pantaloons and boots, and then, blowing out the light, tumble into the bed, and commended myself to the care of heaven. Whether that mattress was stuffed with corn cuffs or broken crockery, there is no telling. But I rolled about a good deal and could not sleep for a long time. At last, I slid off into a light doze and had pretty nearly made a good offing towards the land of Nod, when I heard a heavy footfall in the passage and saw a glimmer of light come into the room from under the door. Lord save me, thinks I, that must be the harpooner, the infernal herd peddler, but I lay perfectly still and resolved not to say a word till spoken to, holding a light in one hand and that identical New Zealand head in the other. The stranger entered the room and, without looking towards the bed, placed his candle a good way off from me on the floor in one corner, and then began working away at the note cords of the large bag I before spoke of as being in the room. I was all eagerness to see his face, but he kept it at veritas for some time while employed in unlacing the bag's mouth. This accomplished, however, he turned around when, good heavens, what a sign! Such a face! It was of a dark purplish yellow color, here and there stuck over with large blackish looking squares. Yes, it's just as I thought. He's a terrible buffalo. He's been in a fly, got dreadfully cut, and here he is, just from the surgeon. But at the moment he chanced to turn his face to so towards. But I don't fancy having a man smoking in bed with me. It's dangerous. Besides, I ain't insured. This being told to Quicket. He had once complied and again politely mentioned me to get into bed, rolling over one side as much as to say, I won't touch a leg of ya. Good night, landlord, said I. You may go. I turned in and never slept better in my life. Owing, I suppose, to his keeping his arm at sea unmethodically. In sun and shade, his shirt sleeves irregularly rolled up at various times. These same are of his, I said, look for all the world like a strip of that same patchwork, quiet. Indeed, partly lying on it, as the arm did when I first awoke. I could hardly tell it from the quiet, they so blent their was together, and it was only by the sense of weight and pressure that I could tell that Quicket was hugging me. My sensations were strange. Let me try to explain them. When I was a child, I will remember a somewhat similar circumstance that befell me. Whether it was reality or a dream, I never could entirely settle. The circumstance was this. I had been cutting up some capper or other. I think it was trying to crawl up the chimney, as I seen a little sweep do a few things previous, and my stepmother, who somehow or other was all the time whipping me or sending me to bed superciless. My mother dragged me by the legs out of the chimney and packed me off to bed. Thought it was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the 21 of June, the longest day in the year in our hemisphere. I felt dreadfully. But there was no help for it. There was no help for it. So upstairs, I went to my little room in the third floor, undressed myself as slowly as possible so as to kill time, and with a bitter sigh go between the sheets. I lay I lay there dismally calculating the 16 entire hours must elapse before I could hope for a resurrection. 16 hours in bed. The small of my back ached to think of it. And it was so light too, the sun shining in at the window and a grey rattling of coaches in the street.